Welcome to Property Question Time with me, Emily Evans. This is the show where you get to ask our property experts your questions. And today I have with me Tim Stallard, Operations Director of Auction House Essex, Stefano Lucatello, Senior Partner of international law firm Kobalt Law, and Tom Moloney from Age Partnership. Right, so the first question is for you. We moved to France last year as early retirees and filed our first French tax returns this year. Next year, my partner is 55 and she can therefore claim her 25% tax-free lump sum from her SIPP. We are planning on returning to the UK next year for as long as it takes to sell our property there, search for and purchase another property and tie a few last things up. If this trip lasted more than 6 months, am I right in thinking we would be UK tax resident and so still be able to take her lump sum tax-free? Would we also not be required to file for a French tax return for 2018?
Wow, Emily, what a question.
What a question, very long
Take
one.
it into bits. The first thing to say is that these two appear to be French tax resident. So by leaving France, they don't necessarily lose their tax residency, just because they're going to spend over 183 calendar days in another jurisdiction. I have to say as an aside though, that if you do go into a particular country and you spend more than 183 calendar days in that country, you could become tax resident in that country, not only as well as the other country you're in. So you could be tax resident in 2 countries. So you've got to be careful about that. So that's the first thing to say. I think their intention is that they will remain French tax resident. But by coming back to the United Kingdom, they may become UK tax resident at the same time. They can avoid this because there is a double taxation treaty between the United Kingdom and 140 odd other countries in the world, one of which is France, which means that you won't be taxed twice for the same lump sum or earnings or capital gain or whatever. So that's the second thing to say. The third thing to say is to make sure that the authorities in both countries know what you are doing. So if you're leaving France, tell the French that you're leaving France for a particular period of time to do whatever, but that you intend to continue being tax resident. And also you could tell the UK tax authorities that you're coming to the United Kingdom and it is not your intention to become tax resident in the United Kingdom. So the moral of the story is make your intentions clear so that you don't fall between 2 stools. And I think I would need a lot more information to give a lot more detailed reply to this question. And if they want to send us a second part with a bit more information, then we can answer a bit more. But that in a nutshell is the answer. You won't be taxed twice as long as you take the necessary precautions to avoid taxation twice.
Okay. And would they be required to file a French tax return?
Yes,
for 2018?
they would still continue to file a tax return for 2018. They are, as tax residents, you are liable to pay taxation on your worldwide income. So they must mention the pension that she may get. It won't necessarily be taxable, but she has to mention it on her tax return.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So yeah, please write back to us to give us more information so we can answer that properly for you. So next question is for you, Tim. I'm 16 years of age and I've inherited a large sum of money, about £75,000. Very nice too. I'm planning to buy some houses through an auction. Am I legally old enough to purchase a house in my name?
Well, interesting question, Emily. What a proactive young person. I think it's great that they want to get on the property ladder. I think it's important to get on as early as you can. Strictly speaking, they wouldn't be able to purchase a property in their name at auction. There may well be several ways around it, namely someone who they trust, probably a parent, buying it in trust so that they take possession when they're 18. My best recommendation for this person would be for them to approach a solicitor, explain the situation and get them to lay out how they could go about this, but also approach the auctioneers and let them know that that is your intention and they may well be able to help you. But great, you know, go for it, why not?
Love a 16-year-old that is thinking about buying a house rather than going out and spending all that money. Very nice too. Right, next question is for you, Tom. I'm retired now and only have a small pension, but I do own my home. What, if anything, can I do with that asset?
I think this is a question a lot of people in retirement are asking now as they find themselves asset rich and cash poor, Emily. Unfortunately, more and more people are having to go through this thought process to see if the house can help them in retirement. I think the first thing to consider is downsizing suitable for you? If you want to take equity out of your house, that's probably the first way you should think about doing it. But if it's a house that you love and you're living somewhere you want to be and that's not a feasible consideration for you, then equity release or a lifetime mortgage might be something that you'd want to consider. To be honest, now is a fantastic time for people to look in more detail at what a lifetime mortgage would mean for them, because the market's never been in a better position. Rates are at a historic low. We have brands now like Nationwide Building Society who are in this space offering lifetime mortgages. And we tend to find that people can have lots and lots of different ways of taking the money from the property. So there's lots of flexibility in there. They can either withdraw the cash as a lump sum, or perhaps arrange a flexible drawdown facility where they can release the money gradually over time. I think that the really positive things for clients looking at utilising the house in retirement now is they can literally build whatever solution they want around their own specific circumstances, because there's so many options out there now for them to consider.
There are so many options, but I think sometimes that's bad for the fact there are so many companies that are offering to buy their house and rent it back to them. That's an option, and a much reduced market value. So that's probably a terrible option. So get them to probably look into more of these lifetime mortgages.
Absolutely. I think the key thing in any decision process like this is go get some expert advice.
Yeah.
Speak to somebody who can guide you through the process. And what I would say now, even for people who are considering equity release or a lifetime mortgage, try to find a specialist advisor where their remit will go far beyond that. Because in real terms, the lines have blurred between what a residential mortgage and a lifetime mortgage look like. So if you are going to find an advisor, make sure it's somebody who can look at all the options for you. And maybe even step back and look at your pension provision as well, and see, instead of borrowing, maybe you can utilise your pension more in retirement. But I think you're right. I think advice is key here. But the great thing is there's lots of specialist firms out there. Lots of advice that you can access. And most of the specialist firms will take you through that advice process and issue a specific recommendation for you without there even being any cost or charges involved in that.
So don't just call up that advert in the newspaper that says we'll buy your home.
No, definitely not. Go get yourself some whole of market advice. Find someone you can trust.
Great, thank you for that. That's really good advice. Right, fantastic. So we have a golden nugget from you today, Stefano.
My golden nugget, Emily, is this. When you start to look for a property abroad, you must take time. And I always advise clients that they need 12 to 18 months to look for a property abroad, because looking for a property abroad is different from looking for a property in the United Kingdom. So go onto the internet, look at forums, make sure that the websites that you look at are true and are current and are not false, because there are lots of false things on the websites. Make sure that everything is modern and up to date. Watch television programs and read books, and then start to look and take lots of notes. Remember, there are thousands of properties out there. If the first one you look at is not the right one for you, you'll find one somewhere. And also the importance of finding abroad as well is make sure that you've sold your asset and sold your property over here before you commit to anything abroad, because of the Well, if you want to move permanently abroad, absolutely, because the system of buying property abroad is totally different from our system. And we had a question last week where we said the same sort of thing, that you've got to be careful. You've got to get everything in line, get your assets done and in the bank account, and then you can use that money to buy a property abroad. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Wonderful. That's all we have time for right now, but stay with us and we'll be back with you after this short break. Welcome back to Property Question Time with me, Emily Evans. Today I have with me Tim Stallard, Stefano Lucatello and Tom Moloney. We're going to start off with a golden nugget from you, Tom.
People looking at equity release or borrowing in retirement, Emily, normally think it has to be on the property that they live in. I think the industry is seeing more and more people now utilising their equity in their property to purchase a new home, so they can actually use it to move. Sometimes in retirement, as strange as it sounds, downsizing to a smaller property can actually be more expensive. So for example, where I come from in Yorkshire, you may have a 4-bedroom detached house, but if you want to move to a nice 2-bedroom apartment in Bournemouth to be near your family, it's a lot more expensive. I think it's useful for people to know, instead of considering equity release on the house in Yorkshire, they could actually utilise it on the flat in Bournemouth and do it as part of the move. And that sometimes helps people make that transition from the house to the smaller property, but in a location they want to be in.
Fantastic. So the first question is for you, Stefano.
Right.
Nice short one for you this time. You'll be pleased to know. I want to evict my tenant because I wish to sell the property. I have served her an eviction notice. Is this enough?
An eviction notice sounds rather combatant, rather attack-like. Well, let's start with the first thing, which is it isn't an eviction notice, it's a notice to quit. Less attacking. Is it a commercial property or is it a residential property? Two different things apply. If it's a residential property, then you have to serve a notice under the Housing Act. And as long as you serve a notice under the proper section of the Housing Act and it's the right form, then you don't need to do anything else. Just leave the tenant to quit on the due date, go in, do an appraisal of the property and see that everything's been left according to as it should be, and then you can take possession of the property again. If the tenant doesn't leave when he or she should leave, then you can, of course, take the matter to court under a quick procedure under Section 22 of the Housing Act, and that will help you get rid of the tenant. If it's a commercial matter, then this will all have to be done under the Landlord and Tenant Act 1954 Part 2, which deals with anything to do with commercial tenancies. And the notice to quit has to be served in a different manner, 6 to 12 months beforehand, and it can be, you can get possession of your property in one of 6 different conditions which are set out in the Landlord and Tenant Act. So the answer to the question is, as long as you've done everything correctly, yes, there's nothing more for you to do but sit, wait for the time to elapse, and then take your property back.
With regards to if it was a residential property,
Yes.
would you recommend that they get the postal recorded delivered, or get them to sign, if they're taking the letter to the house, get them to sign for
The notice to
letter?
quit?
The notice to quit, yes.
I would always serve a notice to quit by recorded delivery.
Yeah.
Then you have, or with a process server, very rarely with a process server, but a process server would then serve an affidavit, would prepare an affidavit of service. But the best way is recorded delivery. Of course, if the person isn't there to accept delivery of the letter, then you've got a problem because it will not be delivered correctly. So in some cases, it might be better to have a process server to do it. Then you do know that it has been served, the guy or the lady has received it, it's in his or her hands, and there's no ambiguity whatsoever about it.
Thank you very much for that. So next question is for you, Tim. I'm a first-time buyer purchasing a property. Should I opt for an auction house or a house through an estate agent's website?
Okay, my best advice to you would be to pick the house you love. You know, if you're gonna, to give you an analogy, if you had 2 options for a holiday and one was to drive a Bentley to somewhere you don't want to go for a week, or to drive a 30-year-old banger to get to somewhere that you really, really do want to spend a week, you're going to pick the banger and go to the place that you want to stay. If you're buying this for your home, it's your home. Pick somewhere that you love. You know, it's that's got to be the ultimate decision. As a first-time buyer, it's probably a bit easier for you to buy through an estate agency, but if you've fallen in love with a property that an auction house is offering, then why not go for it? You might have to put a bit more legwork in at the beginning, but that's fine. The auctioneers can help you. There's plenty of auction financiers around that you can approach, and just make sure that you get everything lined up. But the vehicle that you drive to get there isn't what's important. It's all about where you're going. This is your home, and you have to love where you live. So for your first home in particular, because everybody loves their first one, pick the house. Don't worry about who it's with. You'll get there in the end. And I think that's probably the best advice I could give them.
Great advice.
You probably find, though, that the property may also be on lots of websites, and therefore you can find the same property in different locations.
Possibly, but with an auction property, the way that auctions work, you need to have sole selling rights, because the auctioneer can sign on behalf of the vendor in exchange contracts. If a deal's going on with an estate agent and the auctioneer has gone with what he believes is the best interest of his client and he exchanges a contract, it would be very rare. Well, it doesn't happen because you need the sole selling rights. But if that did happen, you could have 2 active contracts. So in most cases, if it's offered with an auction house, it will only be offered with the auction house.
I think one thing first-time buyers need to know is the fact that it is more complicated buying through auction. They need to have everything in place before they buy, so just do their research and...
Yes, they do need to do their research. I wouldn't say it's more complicated. I'd actually say it's more streamlined. It's just you've got to do everything in a shorter time period. Things like a lot of the stuff that you would get post-exchange of contracts through a private treaty sale is already provided in a legal pack with an auction sale. So it's then your duty to make sure that you get that legal pack, read through it, and I'd advise taking it to your solicitor, especially as a first-time buyer. Have them look through it. make sure that everything is as it should be, and based on the strength of that legal pack, if you want to buy it, then go for it. Get your funds in line, and then hopefully you'll win in the auction hall.
And one thing with an auction as well, where I've made a mistake before, have your limits. And even if someone else is pushing up, stop going up.
As an auctioneer, don't have the limits. Just keep spending. It's fine.
Thank you for that. So next question is for you, Tom. My grandson is struggling to get on the property ladder. I'd love to help him out, but the money I have is tied up in the house that I live in. Can I use that as collateral in any way to help him out?
I think this sounds a little bit like the bank of mum and dad, which we're seeing a lot more of these days. I think if your family are lucky enough to hold funds and are willing to help you get on the property ladder, they can either gift you the deposit, or I think there's been some new intergenerational mortgages being developed by the likes of Barclays and so on, where they can use that money to kind of offset the initial deposit to get them the mortgage. If you're not lucky enough to hold savings, which unfortunately a lot of mums and dads and grandma and granddads out there aren't lucky enough to have that kind of money, then a lifetime mortgage again can be a real consideration for them. And in many respects it allows people to take some wealth from the property and ultimately gift it down through the generations, whether that's to your son and daughter, or in this instance to a grandson or a granddaughter, so that they can get on the property ladder. And I think what's fantastic again about the range of lifetime mortgages that are out there now is that whether it's the person taking out the loan or whether it's the person benefiting from the loan, they have plenty of choice. They can choose to either service the interest collectively, maybe in this instance the grandson's happy to pay the interest on the original loan, or maybe grandma's just decided that I want to give you this money and I'm not going to come chasing you for it to be returned at some point. But I think there's great options out there now for intergenerational borrowing, and definitely in the lifetime mortgage space, more and more people are considering how they can utilise their equity to pass the value of the wealth down.
Thank goodness as well, though, because it's so hard for first-time buyers anyway. So thank goodness
It's
that families can help.
impossible in some instances, particularly if a young couple are paying high rents and they just don't have that disposable income to put that deposit together. It's fantastic when mum and dad or grandma and grandpa can step in and just give them that little helping hand to get them started.
And now that the fact that first-time buyer stamp duty has been abolished up to 300,000,
it makes it even more affordable. But again, similar to my last question that you asked, advice is crucial. I think for anybody gifting money intergenerationally, the biggest thing you should do is just make sure that at any point in the future you're not going to need that money yourself.
And make sure you live 7 years, because it could be it's a win-win situation if you think about it. Grandma giving grandson or granddaughter money, lives 7 years, potentially exempt transfer, which means that if that amount of money, of course, will not be taken into account when he or she dies, as long as he or she survives 7 years. Gift, you need to log into a system where you understand that if you have a pot of money, you can't or you shouldn't die with this pot of money not having been used correctly or given away. You have lifetime transfers that you can give, and you can give your money away gradually, as long as, of course, you have the day-to-day money to survive.
Which is where advice is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
so the key is surviving 7 years, so your grandchild or son or daughter.
Get some good advice and live as long as you can. Absolutely.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that, fantastic. So finally, we're going to finish off with a golden nugget, and the golden nugget is coming from you, Tim.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, I've got a good golden nugget for people who are working in the industry, namely estate agents. A lot of property that should be sold in auction is quite often offered by estate agents through a private treaty sale, despite the fact that this isn't the best method to sell said property. So in those instances, by offering it through themselves, the estate agents can quite often not be doing what's best for their client. Now, almost every auction house will have some form of partner agent scheme, and if you're selling your house through an estate agent and you're thinking about auction, you can approach the estate agent as well about selling by auction. Now, the estate agents can introduce a property to an auction house and it will be sold under their banner. It's still going through that estate agency. So it's a way for estate agents to have a bolt-on service. They can offer auctions without having to set up an auction house themselves. And it's sold using their banner. They're normally going to be named at the rostrum by the auctioneer and thanked for introducing the property. And of course the commission that's paid is shared between the auction house and the estate agent. So it gives them the opportunity to have a more complete package that they offer to their clients. As a vendor, so if you're selling your property and it's with an estate agency, there's no problem with you talking to those estate agents and saying, look, do you think this should be sold by auction? And their response really should be, well, we don't do auctions, but let me call the auction house that we're aligned with and get them to appraise it. And from that vendor's point of view, it's always worth the appraisal. You know, it might come back as, actually, no, we're better off sitting and waiting with the estate agent to see if the sale comes through that way. But more often than not, you'll find, well, if the property's right for auction, surely we should be selling it by auction. So you don't have to annoy your estate agent and take your property away from them. They can quite simply divert that into another method of sale. But it's great for the estate agents because they are normally the problem properties, and they'll be focusing too much time on them, struggling to get it away, possibly getting a bit of a negative relationship with their vendor. You know, give it to the guys who are supposed to sell that sort of property, and it works out best for everybody.
What if someone was to say to you, oh, but going through auction, we're going to be putting our house on for under market value and selling for under market value?
I just don't think that's true with auction. I think if you'd just renovated a house and it was all tip top, and I went to appraise it, I'd be saying, put this with an estate agent, because with an auctioneer, you might get it sold, but it might not be at that top value. However, most auction properties are exactly that, a property that should be sold at auction. And in actual fact, what you see time and time again is when the auctioneer sells the auction property, they get more money for it than any other method of sale, because you get all of your cash buyers in a room, all of the investors, and see who will pay the most. And it's as simple as that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but please do keep your questions coming in and send them to www.property-tv.co.uk or email us at info@property-tv.co.uk. Thank you very much to our experts today, who have been Tim Stallard, Stefano Lucatello, and Tom Moloney. From me and the team here, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.